Welcome to Lead with Storytelling podcast. And today I have the pleasure of welcoming Dianah on this episode. Hi, Dianah.
Hello, Sachi. It's lovely to be here.
So, Dianah and I, we're friends, but it's been interesting to see all the ways that she's grown in her field, in her line of work. And very recently, she's taken a turn. You want to tell us what that is? You have a new adventure.
Yeah, that's the right word, an adventure. I guess it's one of those daring moves, one of those things that have been brewing in my head for a very long time, my head and my heart at the same time. And I just decided to take a leap of faith this year. I'm like, you know what? You never know till you try. So recently, I started a literary arts consultancy called Stark Pages, and the whole idea behind Stark Pages, it's so fascinating. When I talk about Stark Pages, I always go to the part that doesn't even involve spending or bringing money in. Yes, while Stock Pages is dealing with, oh, we're editing, we're trying to help support writers, young writers. Our focus is mainly on young writers. We support others, but it's mainly on young writers. Because like I always tell people this, it's born out of a desire to satisfy my 13-year-old self who would have needed help at a certain point when she fell in love with literature. So this is actually to help people in that age range and other people as well. But it's a business. It's a business. I'm not going to act like it's some NGO. It's not an NGO. It's a business. So we deal with editing, proofreading, and all that jazz that come with literary arts consultancy. But the part that excites me the most is the part that speaks to that 13-year-old me. And this is the part where we get to work with young writers. We're coaching, we're mentoring, we're speaking to them and helping them actually get their literary voices heard. Because for me, it's a passion, writing. And I think it's so easy for young people to lose that voice when they don't get the support they need, or when they're being pushed to read something more serious, be a doctor, be a scientist, be an accountant, be a lawyer. It's all great. You can be that and still keep your storytelling voice. You can still write and be a lawyer. Like, it doesn't take anything off the table for you. If it's even the money triangle, it probably even brings you another source of income. But it is something that when you have the gift, we just do not want to see young people lose it because they're just not guided. They're not getting the support, the mentorship, just some sort of direction. And I think that's the part that excites me most about Stock Pages, getting to attend to what I feel is like a need that nobody's looking at. Whether the kids are getting published or not is not the thing, but they just shouldn't lose their creative spirit, their creative drive, that lovely voice, that thing that keeps them wanting to read and write. They just shouldn't lose it. So that's the part that excites me most about Stock Pages. So we delved into it. We started it like about 3 months ago, and it's still new, but we've been doing so much behind the scene, and we're bringing more on the surface. I'm not going to start bringing things out in the open till they're nice and tidy. But yeah, we're doing a lot behind the scene, and it's so exciting.
I can attest to the slow and steady approach to unraveling the everything that you have in store for everyone, and I want to say kudos. It's a brave step, and it's a worthy endeavor. And for everyone who is listening, Dianah has a BA in French, an MSc in Media and Marketing Communication, and she brings a rich academic background to her storytelling craft. I mean, over the past 20 years, she's navigated diverse industries, including aviation, hospitality, private equity, technology, just weaving her unique insights into her narratives. And I think that brings me to the next question, which is what inspired your passion for storytelling? I mean, I know you've alluded to having a very young start, but what's the story here?
I'll try and make it a short version.
I don't
Okay, I'll
mind
tell you.
really.
My older sister, I think we come from a family where people just seem to like books around them a lot. So
Lucky you.
when I was 7, my older sister, she was 9 then, she was writing, and she became really popular in school, in our primary school. She was writing stories, and she's very good as an artist as well. So she could write and do her own illustrations. So she's really on the quiet side. So she was really popular in school. So I was the younger sister to the popular girl who would make the stories, and she would have her. And I was fine being that. I just loved to read. I didn't care about writing at that point. I just loved to read. So I'd read anything. I was 7 then. I just read books. I wasn't writing anything. So I continued in that way, but I could see my sister writing, and I was like her cheerleader. Well, I really enjoyed reading her stuff. I was like I think I was probably the first person to read her book when she'd have written anything. So I'd read through. And I was very okay with that. Then I think fast forward to getting into secondary school, I was about 11, 12. I was still reading. I was reading more hardcore book. I was reading James Hadley Chase. And I was reading James Hadley Chase. I had moved on from, I was still reading Cyprian Quincy, Wole Soyinka. I loved Wole Soyinka. Drama, plays. Wole Soyinka is still my guy anytime, any day. Olarotimi. I was reading all these books. I had no intention of writing. But at some point, I think the person who inspired me to write oddly is a cross of Cyprian Quincy and James Hadley Chase. A very odd combination. Don't ask me how. But I'll explain. Cyprian Quincy, for me, he did the bit where he could transport me into places that I had never been before. And I loved it. So he gave me that escape version of things. Then James Hadley Chase, I love crime fiction, but it wasn't just about the crime for me. Yes, I wanted to solve the mystery along with whoever the detective was, be it Garland or whoever, I wanted to solve the mystery. But one thing I loved about James Hadley Chase was his vivid imagery that he could create. Oh my goodness. He could describe the characters, and I would see them. Like I could cast them in a movie. Like I had the picture in my head, and I was like, my God, how can somebody write like this? Because now I feel like I know these people. I'd be watching a movie and I'd be like, oh my goodness, this person could play Sarek in James Hadley Chase's XYZ book. Oh, this person could be Slim Grissom and Orchid from Miss Blandish. I was beginning to cast characters in my head. I was like, oh gosh, I need to write. I need to see how he's doing it. So it was out of curiosity. I wanted to entertain myself. I was curious. I wanted to see how these guys were doing it, how they were able to transport people to see that visual. Like, how were they doing it? So it was from that I started writing. So I started writing, but I didn't go into plays or stories. I started with poetry because I was lazy and it was short. I could write a poem in 1 page and I was done. So yeah, the lazy person in me was playing around then. So I started with that. I started poetry, and the response I got was incredible. I was just in my early teens. I was maybe about 12. And the responses I was getting was really good. I was like, oh, people really think these are good. I was like, okay, good. So I started writing more. To entertain myself. And I had a group of friends who were also writing. So it was more like we'd swap our stories, our little poems. And so the circle of friends I had then were in that headspace with me. So it worked. It kept me in check. Then as I grew older, I had this, Aina Brittle Paper. His older brothers, they were my first major cheerleaders. They saw some things I'd written, and you would think I'd won a Pulitzer or a Nobel Prize. Those guys, they made me feel like I was doing something really special. And I give them all the credits for me staying on as a writer, because they saw something that I did not even see then. They hyped me, they encouraged me. They even started giving me topics to write on. Like, oh, write on XYZ and bring it to us, let's see, So it became more exciting. I was like, oh, now I have an audience. So it took it to another level for me. And from then on, the more I read, the more I wanted to write. I kept trying to compare myself. I didn't have my own style. I wanted to see how this person could write like this. I was trying to imitate a lot of writers. And that was how my storytelling voice started growing. Then as I grew older, of course, you realize that, okay, you can't keep trying to sound like James Hadley Chase or Cyprian Quincy. You need to tell your own stories the way you want to tell your own stories. So I think that was when I started finding my voice, and I started writing my stories the way I was comfortable with. It didn't matter who liked it or who did not like it. I was expressing myself. I wasn't thinking too much about it. I was just writing, and just it was also a form of escape for me. I just wanted places I wanted to go in my head. I just made up stuff about them and just put it out there. So I still have my collection of things I wrote as a teenager. I kept everything I wrote.
Oh
I
my
kept, well, almost everything I wrote. So yeah, I think that's how I built my storytelling, and I just kind of stayed in that space.
I still have, I don't know if I brought them with me to Canada, but I still have some journals that I used to keep. And I think my first ruminations after reading some, I think, for instance, I just recently I recently bought Obi Ebuna's Madness of Didi.
Oh, I think my sister was talking about it, or somebody I know was talking about it recently.
You'll be surprised how hard it is to find print copies of certain books now. And people listening now don't know we've had almost 30 minutes of conversation before we hit record. And it takes me back to that point we were making about the relevance of keeping hard copies.
Yes.
Which is that besides the experience of the unique experience reading, marking a hard copy, there's something you do for the culture when you actually preserve a copy of any edition of a book.
Totally agree.
Not just a print, not just in print, but even certain editions of certain books, because they tell different stories, different podcasts, different conversations. I'm sorry. I digress. Let's
I'm with you on that one. So yeah.
let's step back. Okay. So after you giving your after giving us that background, I can see similarities, and I can see the connection between how your passion was sparked, and how and what you're doing right now, because it's evident how important it is, especially at a young age, to have people who mentor, who cheer you on, to at least let you know that you're doing something right. And I think that's really powerful. But if you just take a moment, just tell me a little bit more about how, I can tell, okay, when you read to escape, perhaps, right? But when you're in the real world, there's something you bring with you from that space into your work or into your career. And can you tell us a little bit what those benefits are, that the power of storytelling to impact or influence your approach to your work?
I think the one that comes to mind readily, one of them is being able to communicate whatever your vision is. I think being able to communicate your vision is a good storytelling. It requires good storytelling. It may not be in that in-depth literary form, but you need to be able to convey your vision in a compelling way to whoever your target audience is, whether it's your colleagues, whether it's to your potential clients or customers. You need to be able to sell that vision. So for me, I think storytelling, that's one of the things that I think storytelling has helped me over the years do, is being able to communicate that vision. Let people see it. Make it so vivid and real to them that they don't even realize that they can. It becomes so real to them that it stops being your story, becomes their story as well. Like they're sold on it because you've been able to communicate a compelling vision to them. And another thing I think storytelling has been able to do for me in work life is, I will digress a bit when I explain this part. It's about building trust and inspiring people, building trust and inspiring. A good storytelling technique helps you build trust and inspire story. And why I said I'll digress a bit, you know how I watch movies almost shamefully, almost as much as I read these days, because, well, yeah, there are other things taking over my life now. So movies just kind of fit in nicely into a little space. So when you watch movies or when you read a good poem, You can see that soldiers going to war, for example, you need that commander, that person who comes in and gives you this powerful motivational speech. He is selling you the dream. He's inspiring you. He's instilling confidence. He's drawing you into why you should be doing this. So for me, I think storytelling, like, you can't even take it out of anything. You can't take it out of your work life. Even when you're communicating change, you could be firing someone because I've had to deal with layoffs and everything, companies going down or things happening the way they should not be happening. And you need to be a good storyteller. You need to be able to help make them understand why. That's if you're a manager who cares at all. You need to be able to sell it to them, why they're being laid off. And they'll be like, oh, they're being laid off. But they'll be like, oh yeah, we understand. It's all a technique. You need to be able to sell, because it's a story you're telling them. It's the truth you're telling them. So a story you're not fictionalizing it. You're not making it up, but you're selling them that story. You're trying to communicate effectively through that story. Because when you communicate without building a story, it's so rigid. It's not fun. I know fun is not the right word for it, but that's the truth. It's not fun. You just come, boom, you just communicate straight up. But a nice little story that ties it in, that drags people into your world, is a good way to communicate anytime. At work, I worked in customer service, I worked in aviation, I worked at the airport, I worked in the hotel industry, hospitality. And I have had to look people in the eyes and tell them about their missing luggage. Oh, your luggage is missing. Oh, how they've missed a flight and they've got this really important thing they've got to go do. It takes storytelling. Even in your interviews, let's be honest, I've had interviews with big tech and I'm a good storyteller. And I know when we do the interviews, it comes to play because they ask you questions and you pull them into your world. You end up even sometimes directing the narrative, directing your interview questions. Your interviewer doesn't even see it, but you've started directing how the interview is going because of how you're telling the story. You're taking them, you're giving them what they want, but you're also pulling them into an area of interest that you can even build on. So storytelling, it's such a, you can't even belabor it. It's people underestimate the power of storytelling. But it's there in the process of you getting that job, in the process of you keeping that job, in the process of you communicating internally, externally. Storytelling comes to play all the time. You may not recognize it, you may not see it, that you'll find out that people who are able to tell those little stories and keep you drawn into why they're communicating with you, you just connect better with them. You just find yourself connecting better with them. You understand their perspective more than somebody who just comes and just hits you with information and is gone. So storytelling works all the time. And there's always a place for it.
Yeah. And it's not sound like a broken record, but again, I can attest to how passionately you feel about that, because I've seen a few of the posts you put up on Instagram and how you interact with your kids, how you educate using stories. And I caught on that one of your kids is actually he's on the ops with his own book.
Yes. And oddly, I did not even spot it, because I pride myself in being able to spot it, that people, oh, you know how to tell a story, but I didn't even spot it, because I think I probably you just see your kids as babies. My son was about 6 years old, and his teacher actually told me, I was like, oh, but he's really a good writer. So we have the parents' evening where you have to talk to the teachers. And she was like, oh, have you seen Daniel's stuff? Then she brought out his stuff for me. She was showing me his work from school. And she was like, he's really a good writer. Like, he takes what you tell him and he does so much with it. And so she was saying it. I was like, oh, okay. Then I read it. I was like, oh, okay, this is really good for a 6-year-old, actually. Yeah. I just never really noticed it like that, So because she had drawn my attention to it, I started making him do something with it. And it came in. I wasn't forcing him to write or anything, especially at that age. It was more like he was writing in scribbles on a piece of paper. He'd write a little poem. He was really fascinated with poetry. He'd write it. He'd be like, oh, mommy, this is haiku. He'd come and he'd tell me this is some poetry thing. So he was always showing me something. I said, okay, you know what? If you're able to, I gave him a book. I said, this is a book. every poem you think of in your head, every little story, even if it's one line, write it in here. Don't write it on a piece of paper that we can't find, write it in here. I said, if you put them all together, mommy's going to publish it and you're going to have your book with your name on it. So I made it sound so fascinating and it worked. So he started writing on a book. He was putting all his stuff together. And I really did. And I knew it wasn't about sales. I went on KDP, published the book for him. And he was like a celebrity in school. Everybody was talking about him. They gave him a star. They said he was the first kid that had ever written a book in the school. He came at the assembly. So he was really popular in school, you know? And for me, it was about showing him what was possible. It wasn't about the book itself. It was what was possible beyond it, beyond just writing. And I have done that with a number of people, my younger sister inclusive, my younger sister lives in the UK now. She was endorsed by the Art Council because of certain persons' coaching and mentorship, because she's really good at it. And we just kind of guided her along that line. And here she is. She's some writer collaborating with some big names. And I'm looking at her in the background. I'm like, okay, you know, for me, it's exploring. You have a gift, you have a talent, you have a skill set. Explore it. Don't just act like it's nothing and sweep it under the rug. If it doesn't work out, if it doesn't work out for you, if you don't become some big name with it, it doesn't matter. But you're fulfilling something in you. It's something you already have. Why not just make something out of it? You know, even if it's just for yourself, the satisfaction of putting it together, just do it. So storytelling is that thing that I think is it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And when you spot it somewhere, when I spot it somewhere, I just kind of sit on you on it a bit. Like, oh yeah. So have you written anything lately? I do those little follow-ups to people who I know are storytellers, or they have that, I see it in them. I just ask them randomly, no pressure, nothing. So my son now, he's been lazy. So the post you saw, that's me trying to make sure he doesn't stay lazy, because he's still good. And he wrote that thing that you saw, and it took him 5 minutes to write that. But because he's interested in other things, he's like, Mommy, I'm not so interested. I'm like, you're interested in writing. You just don't want to write because it means you have to sit down and just put your little brain to work for a bit. So I'm trying to, because I think that's the work of a parent at some point. You need to guide them. They don't even know what they're doing at some point. They're like, yeah, I don't want it anymore. But you still have the gift, right? So go use it. So that's where we are right now.
And in a way, you already answered my next question, but I want to pick on, there's an element to your work, your present work, which is more like literacy, literary advocacy.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is the state? Okay, so for instance, let me give some context. For instance, in Nigeria, they have a popular saying, which I would never be caught saying, which is that Nigerians don't read, right? I don't believe it. I don't know why, but I've had people who I also respect who have reiterated that same point, which is that Nigerians don't read, and I still don't believe it. However, it points to an issue, which is, or a question, which is, what is the state of reading? I know you're currently based in UK, but as far as, or for the period or duration that you operated or worked in Nigeria, and maybe even globally, what do you think is the state of reading? People reading more, reading less, not at all?
Honestly, I don't think I'd say people are reading less. Okay, well, to be fair, maybe people are reading a bit, reading less, because when I was growing up, we did not have the distraction of social media. I say that with due respect to social media, because I love social media. I know it's very useful and relevant, but it can be a distraction. So people have the short-term memories where instead of reading, they just feel like, oh, I can get like some little narration. Somebody just explained it. Oh, there's this little narration of this thing on XYZ. But the core readers, people who still love to read, are still reading. And I think readers don't necessarily make noise about reading. So people who talk about people not reading half the times are those people who probably are not reading. So I don't know what the narrative, because the circle of people that I still, and we're probably old school because we grew up reading. So we're probably old school, but I speak to my kids, and I know I am not an authority in that field. I do not have the stats. But I was speaking to someone who is in the field, who works with children, is it's the profession for them. They work with children. They're in schools, and I've spoken to a couple of them, and they are saying with more authority than me that children are not reading. So people, maybe older people like us, are still reading, but the upcoming children, I think it's more of the generation that are upcoming, they're the ones not reading. And the schools are concerned a bit. They're not concerned a bit, they're concerned a lot. Because recently there's something that we're trying to do. We're trying to go into schools and sensitize people on reading. We're trying to get those children who are, and I know I'm digressing a bit, but it's in an attempt to answer this question. We're talking to schools, and they're very open to it, having us come talk to children who write. Why we're talking to the children who write in the school is when your friend writes a book, even if you do not read normally, you want to read your friend's book. So if we're encouraging the right readers and writers to keep doing that, it may have that ripple effect on one or two persons, not because they would read normally, but because, oh, my friend is not a writer. My friend just published a book, so I will read it because my friend wrote the book. So it's like we're trying to trick them into reading. So that's why I say I may speak for my generation. I say, no, we're still reading. But people who are working with these children are saying they're not reading. They're not reading as much as they should be. They're not reading. They see a downwards trend. So I would respect what they're saying because they've been in that field. They know what's going on. So now they're trying to, they send messages to parents, get your children to read 10 to 15 minutes every day. In my head, I'm like, 10 to 15 minutes. Do you know how many hours we were reading back then? Our parents weren't telling us to read. It was our form of entertainment. We did not have Instagram and TikTok, and we barely even have a TV channel that would stay all through the night. So so you were reading because it was a form of entertainment for you. That was your way of getting entertained if you were locked indoors. So, but now they're distracted by there's so much going on. They've got this, they've got games, they're playing a lot of, they're doing 1,000,001 things. So reading is taking a back seat. And like I said, I defer to the authorities, and they are saying it is a major thing. The government is concerned. They are trying to get kids to read more. So definitely, then in that regard, I would say yes. The generation coming up, I guess they're not reading as much. Because even when I'm on the train and everything, the people you see reading, they're really like the older people going to the office and all that. They're the ones reading on the train. It's not really the young people. The young people are on their phones. Unless they're reading an ebook anyway, I don't know, but they're on their phones all the time. So I think I think it's good to have more talks in that regard, and not even from older people like myself, but from the younger people, because teens would listen to teens more than, you come with your idea and like, oh, you should read it. Oh gosh, it's sounding like my mom. But if it's from their friends saying, oh, I read this really cool book. Look at the Wimpy Kids series, for example. It's one of those books that this kid is reading it, the other kid is reading, they're all talking about it. It becomes a big deal, So there's got to be more done in that space. So maybe they grow up continuing with that mindset, we hope. But we can't give up on them reading. We can't.
No, we can't. And I agree with you 100%. I mean, it's also seeing how people like you and every other advocate who is also trying to find new ways to trick kids to read. I saw a podcast with some teachers once where they said that we should try and normalize children reading or counting graphic novels and comics as reading also, as a way to introduce them, because many of us get into reading through different avenues or instances, and you never know. Sometimes it's a song, sometimes it's a novel, sometimes it's a comic.
Yes.
We just keep, just like you said, keep at it.
I recently, I'll just take you still on this whole children reading. I saw I saw it's been on Instagram a lot. I don't know if it's just a UK thing. There's this newspaper for kids. It's called This Week. It's a weekly news. Is a weekly news. Is a weekly newspaper for kids. So it's written in simple language. It's like a proper newspaper, but it comes in weekly. Little topics, different things for kids with puzzles, but little news bits in it for kids. So I subscribed last month. So it comes every week for my kids. Even so, my kids are 10 and 7. So I tell them, okay, you've got this. You need to be done reading it before the next edition comes, or else you have two to read, So it's there. It's also, and I love the idea of it. Aside the kids, we're trying to get them to read storybooks and novels and everything. We're trying to get them to read those. It's also a way of getting them to read newspapers. Because I know when we were much younger, I did not like Newswatch and Tell. My dad was reading the heavy stuff. I was a teenager. I did not want to read Newswatch and Tell. I would read unless if there was a fascinating story in it. So you know what my dad did? Because he had 3 daughters. We were the first kids. So my dad would buy us hints.
Really?
He would buy us hints.
For anyone listening who doesn't know what hints is, tell us, what's hints?
Hints is more of a romance. It's more of romance and soft stories. So the stories were softer. There was fatherhood with eBay. I still remember in Kim and Emeka, his kids. They were like soft columns. So they were softer sell than the hard-hitting newspaper that he would buy for himself. So these were weekly magazines. So Hints was a softer sell. My dad loves, I don't think till date, my dad reads daily. My dad reads a lot. So we got the reading thing from my father. He reads a lot. So he would buy it. And I'm sure he realized that, okay, these kids, they're not really reading this Newswatch and everything. So he started buying us hints. So buy hints for us. So we'd have hints. So, and we were reading it. So we were reading it. We're looking forward to the next edition next week and everything. So it was, I remember the first time I met Tony Khan, that was what I told him. I was like, oh my goodness, it's such an honor to meet you guys. You guys were such a huge part of my growing up because I read hints a lot, But you see, so that was how he got us into picking up magazines. And he would buy all those the weekend magazines were always more fun and interesting. My dad always bought them. So you'd see us scrambling for who would read it first and everything. So you need to find what works for your kids. What are they interested in? As long as it's appropriate. Because to be fair, some things were not some of the columns were not appropriate. I can tell. Yeah, some of the columns were not. Some of the columns were not appropriate, but we will skip those. 9 to 5 wasn't appropriate for my age as a teen. Yeah, but we'll skip those. But anyway, it was his way of getting us to read. And those were simpler times, to be honest. We weren't carried away by, you could read the most outrageous things, and it just didn't stay in your head for too long, But it was a way of getting us to read stuff. My dad would buy if you were interested in the kind of book, or if he felt a book was a good one, he would make it seem really interesting. And my dad was very strict, so it wasn't like it was one fun dad. But he would make it seem really interesting. Then I think at some point we just wanted to really impress him that we had read the book or the magazine, so we're reading it. But whatever works, just get them to read. Find the trick that works for your kids and make it work. Because the teachers can only do so much in school. If there's no follow-up on the home front to see what the kids are reading, you can't force people to read, but find what piques their interest. Your kid likes football, buy them football magazines. There are those magazines that deal with football. Just find that thing they're interested in and get them to read from that. Get them to read things. That it has worked for me. That's what I'm doing with my kids. I'm trying to buy things based on their interest. Then you kind of force them a bit to read one that is not of their interest and say, okay, if you read it, I will get another one that is of your interest. Then, we do this negotiation bits. It comes with the territory.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to say scandalized by, that parenting tip there, but and another interesting thing. I'm really glad you mentioned Tony Khan. Helen Habila used to write for them too.
Yes.
It wasn't Hints. There's another
Hearts.
So Hearts came from Hints.
Yeah, it was like a spin-off.
Yeah, spin-off, and they had a little bit of legal over there. But I found that was my first encounter or first introduction to Helen Habila, Tony Khan. Mm-hmm. I know a few other well-known writers now. Also had did a little thing or stints at in those publications.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting to know they had that fun side
Yeah.
before they started engaging in taking on very serious issues.
So true.
And I do like the idea about that newspaper, so I will check it out this week. You say?
Yes, it's called This Week.
Okay. Yes, that's also. Now I know you travel a lot, and I'm interested in how. I mean, so you like to travel. You have a bit of wanderlust, in you. So what's your most interesting travel story or travel experience? Let me start from there. Then I'll
Hmm.
take it next time.
I'll tell my most interesting travel experience and my okay. I'm not a very exciting travel person. I am a retreat travel type of person. So when I go to places, I look for places. One, there's got to be water there. So I'm looking for a place with a beach or some sort of nature around me. It must have it. I'm not a city traveler. So usually when I travel, that's what I look for. I want to be able to pull away from. I've always lived in like busy towns. In Nigeria, I lived in Lagos. Here, I'm living in London. I want to go away from the noise. So that's how I look for my travel destination. So I want a place that has a history. So the part for me that becomes my adventure is what's the history in those places? What's the story? Oh, when I go to the place, what does it inspire? Does it inspire me to write? Does it inspire me to just relax and think? It has to do something for my it has to do something not because I'm a workaholic, but it has to do something for my mind. Whether I'm creative or I'm writing or I'm not, but it has to do something. Either it's making me rest or it's making me think. So either way, it's got to work. So I'm not a my adventures are not. I don't. I'm not a party person. Hey, shout out to all the people who love to when they travel, they want to have all the fun in the world. I just want peace and quiet. That's how I work when I travel. So I think my most fascinating trip has been Egypt, and it's the most recent trip that I had. And every other trip before now has been more, like I said, to rest, get inspired, and do something. But for me, Egypt has always been on my list. There's some countries that have been on my list for a very long time. There's been on my list, and there's been on my husband's list. So we decided, like, okay, we're just gonna get away for 4 days. Let's go do this Egypt finally. And as blacks, as Africans, I think it's the fascination of knowing that Egypt and a place like Ethiopia, they're one of the few African countries that hold a lot of history that you can go back to and you can ask questions and you can delve into it. And I'm trying to stay away from controversy as I discuss this. I'm trying really hard, but keep it censored. I'll keep it censored. Yeah, because hey, I'm very passionate about certain topics. But anyway, so there are some of the few places that still have a lot of history because I as a black person, our history seems to always start from slave trade and as a Nigerian colonialism. Those are the only records. I want to know what happened before slave trade. Those are the kind of those are the kind of history I'm fascinated by. I want to know what happened before then. And as much as our culture as Nigerians and the Egyptian culture, it's not they're not the same. But it's fascinating to see that some people still have that, so they can trace to so many years back and tell you, this particular thing, this is that. I'm from Edo State. The Bini culture is so rich, but I do not have documents that tell me anything. I do not have, not, we have some, but to the depth that I want it stops at a certain point. And I want our story told by our own people. I don't want it from the perspective of someone else. Because the story will be given, yeah, that's why I said I don't want to go controversial. But the story, but really, if you tell my story, you're going to tell me from your perspective. But if I'm telling my story, I'll tell it from my perspective. So while I'm not invalidating your perspective of the story, I want to know what my perspective, what was my grandfather's perspective, my great-grandfather, what was my ancestors' perspective of the story. I drive past, I don't know if you read Olarotimi's Ovaramen Ogbaisi.
Yes.
I love that book. I love that book because I'm Edo. I am Edo, and I'm like, yes, I want to see more of this. So so those are the kind of things I look out for when I go to a place. So even if it's a European country, I want to visit places like Greece, because hey, come on, we've all in one way or the other dabbled into Greek Greek history, even if it's just watching some Spartacus or one other. So Rome, Italy, we've dealt with Greece, we've dealt with some of their
Yeah.
history. So I like places with a history. That's how I travel. That's what fascinates me about travel. Um, so city travels, not so much really. I would do them if I would do them once in a while, but I'm not a huge fan of city travel. That's why my sister and I will never travel together. She wants to do city travel. I want to go somewhere somewhere else. So yeah, so it's but really that's what inspires my travel. But with cities, I will tell you this: with cities, it's not like I don't enjoy them. I was in Milan a few months ago, and I loved Milan, loved Milan, and it felt like a combination of old and new. And I kind of like that little blend. It's like you can go through some cobblestone streets, and you can see the history. Then you can come out of it and you're like, oh, this is all modern. I really did love Milan, and sometimes you can, even when the place feels modern, you can see the history in those little. You can see the history in some little things, some little details in the places, and it's amazing. I walked past in London here where I live. I used to work in an office in Chelsea, and there was a builder. I can't remember the writer now. I don't know why I forgot the writer's name, but it said on the building, like, let's just assume is Charles Dickens. And like, oh, Charles Dickens lived here. And I was like, oh my goodness, it's one of those things you want to stop and look at the building, and people are probably wondering why she's just standing there like a like a tree, you know? But you're just like, oh my goodness, he probably sat down here when he wrote Oliver Twist. I'm thinking, so some places, so some city trips, they hold a lot to inspire as well. Or sometimes just the hustle and bustle. I wrote one of my favorite poems at an airport, going to, I think I was at an airport in, I don't know where now, one country. I was at the airport. It was the hustle and bustle, and you just keep looking at everybody. You're like, goodness, everybody's just rushing. Where the heck? Then you start making up stories. I do that when I watch people. I make stories about where they're going to. Why is this person rushing? She's probably late for an appointment. She looks like she has a business. Yeah, I make up these stories. So that's the fascination for the city travels for me. I just make up stories. I turn the people into different characters for potential works. So when I make up characters, I actually sit down, I hold a pen sometimes, I look at somebody, I don't know the book I'm going to use you for, but I've already put some descriptions. I'm like, this character is blah, blah, blah. So every travel has it's got something in it for me. I'll always make it work somehow. I'll enjoy it, whether it's city, whether it's some remote place, but the remote places top on my list and the city place next on the list.
Okay, so I'm going to draw you out of that retreat now, just to ask, what just to get a hint or some insight into how you're working with young writers. What's the process? Do you entertain pitches from agents? Direct solicitation from young writers? What's the process, and how do you take them from idea to execution?
Okay, so what we're doing right now, one, we're not working with agents. I really want to leave that middleman. I don't think we're like some big company dealing with agents at this point. I just want to work with the writers directly. But with young people, it's tricky, with safeguarding rules and everything. So we're working with local communities, like the church communities, school communities, and in some cases just personal recommendations. So any child that we have to work with, and really we're working with teenagers, so it could be like maybe not teen, from 12 at least, we can work from that age. So what we're doing is, if usually the kids are not going to reach out to us on their own, so it's always like some grown-up person reaching out to us and saying, oh, my nephew or my niece or my child does XYZ. So it's the parents that we, or the whoever their guardian or the older the adult, the responsible adult in their life is who we do the initial communication with. So we have that initial communication with you. Then even the first communication with the child, you're there. And we want to keep it as transparent as possible. We do not want to have communications with just children. We want you there. Then we want every the one-on-one communication. There are not a lot of them. It's just a one-off talk here and there. Then we'll probably give you a task. Oh, or we want to see what you've worked on. We just want to see what your style is. It's not an exam. Nobody's judging or grading. And like, I want to see what you've written. What's your style? Then we want to see what their interest is, what motivates them. Why do they write? What are their interests? Then we work with you based on your interest. Give you some simple task based on that interest. Do XYZ. We get the parents to email it to us. So we're not dealing with the children at all directly. We take that out of it. It becomes we're avoiding potential lawsuits. We don't want to deal with children and maybe an adult is not there and maybe they do not like the tone or how the communication is done. So we want you in the room. So if you are not fine with it, you can say it right there as the adult and say, oh, we haven't had any complaints anyway, but we just want it to be that way. If you're older, if you're a teenager, then it's fine. If you're an adult from 17, yeah, we can have some conversations without your parents there. But more from 18, we do not have conversation without at least a grown up there from your side, from your neck of the wood. It just keeps things as clean and tidy as possible. So the parents are not concerned about the conversation. They may not say it, but they're not concerned about, hope the communication is proper, hope you're not encouraging them to go. Sometimes it could be religious. I'm a Christian and maybe I'm working with someone from another religion and they don't want you to stylishly tell them things about your religion. So you want them to be in the room and so they see that this is not a conversion party. We're trying to work on literary pieces here. It's strictly literature, so we keep it that way. So we always have an adult in the room. We don't deal with children directly, and the communications are strictly with the parents. If it's a WhatsApp chat, it's on the parent's phone, it's not on the child's phone. If it's an email, it's on the parent's email. So the parents get to see it first before it goes to the child. So it's just a way of just making the parents, the grown-ups in the life of the child, know what's going on. And like I said, most of the people we've worked with so far, they're based on recommendations. So they're people we know or who know someone we know. So we also want them to just see that we're not taking for granted the fact that we know you and we're like, oh yeah, just send your child over. No, you're still going to be in that room. Oh, I'm too busy. Okay, when you're free, we'll talk to your child in front of you. We'll make it work for your schedule, but we will not speak with your child without you. Then for the proposals that for what we're trying to do with the schools, they're going to be at least the English teacher or one of the head teachers. They're going to be there in the room, and it's more of a workshop. What we're planning to do with the schools is more of a workshop to go talk to. So it's not. So if the kids want a one-on-one session, they'll have to go through the school to their parents, then reach out to us. Because we're not going to give our cards to the students and say, oh yeah, call us, So they'll have to, if they're interested and they tell their parents, oh, we want to work with this person, they can tell the school. The school can be the middleman till they get out of the picture, and the parents become the middlemen in this case. So we just, as much as we want to work with kids, we don't want to work with them without an adult supervising the process. Yeah. I think you're muted.
Yeah, the kids we're at it again. If you could give one advice to an aspiring young writer, what would it be?
I would say just keep telling your stories. Keep telling your stories. Keep writing. Keep writing, and not just writing. Keep what you've written. It doesn't matter whether you're getting publishing or not. It helps you keep track of your growth. That's another thing. It gives you something to look back, because sometimes we don't know how much we've grown. It's just like, oh, my work is not good. I just don't think it's good enough. I'm like, let's see what you wrote before. Let's see what you wrote 2 years ago. Let's see what you wrote 3 months ago. We're not static as human beings. We're evolving, we're learning, we're growing. Whether we know it or not, we are growing, and we're taking in from a lot of people, from TV, from games, even the games they play. And I try to tell children, like when we talk to youth and young adults, they like to be called young adults. So youth and young adults, when we talk to them, it's more like we're telling them whatever your interest is, start from there. Build on that. It's easier to write on something you're really, really interested in than to write some alien topic. Just tell me to come write on I love to write, but don't tell me to come write on some medical science thing. I don't know anything about medical sciences. It's going to be like torture because now I have to do research on it. But give me a topic that I'm already comfortable with. It just flows. I want to write. I may do research to make it look better, but naturally I would flow with it. So the whole idea is you want to write whatever you're interested in, write on those, but keep developing yourself. And we tell them to read as well. You're interested in XYZ. Have you read anything written by somebody? And that's my go-to question. Have you read anything written by somebody? Oh, you like football? Oh, do you know, let's assume Ronaldo wrote a book. I don't know if he wrote a book. Oh, have you read his work? Because there are people in that field who would have written something, or the people who have written, they may not be in that field, but they've written something about that particular field. It's always good to see what people's responses are to their books. Not because you're trying to copy their style, but it also helps you see that, people are interested. Because if they're responding to this, it means that they're interested in it. It's a topic people are interested in. So we get them to not just, don't be an island. Don't say, I like to write and I'm just writing. No, you need to read. You need to read. You can't be good. I know the times, the stages in my life where I did not write. When I was doing my master's, I had kids, and I didn't write a lot that period. I didn't write for years, to be honest. And I also wasn't reading. The more you read, the more you want to write, because I don't know if it's a competitive spirit in some of us. At some point, you're like, if this person could put this together, oh my goodness, this is so good. Like I need to think like that. So I don't know if it's competition but if it's competition, it's good competition, because you're not doing it because you're trying to win a prize, but you're trying to push yourself. Yeah. So for me, it's also another way to reading is a good way to keep writing. Reading and be interested in topics, show up in places, and also show up in places where literary stuff I discuss. I attend some random workshop. I go in there. I attend some webinars. Just want to see what other people who are interested in, who are in that space, what they're doing. Attend events. Could be school events. Attend them. Just listen to other people. Don't be an island. Don't think because you have a gift to write, you've got this talent, you can write. That's all it takes. You need to grow, and to grow, you need to be integrated in that world. You need to plant your feet firmly in that space. So I think those are the things I'd give. Document your stuff, stay in that space, be true to yourself, be authentic, be true to what it is that you're interested in as a writer, and just keep growing. Just keep growing. Don't ever stop.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dianah. So I usually have this part of the show where I save for last, which is the rapid fire questions. Yeah, I didn't mention this before, but I think you will like it anyway. Okay. So the first one, what's the one book you could read over and over again?
The one book I could read over and over again. That's such a... You'd think I'd have a book in my head. I don't know. I really don't know if there's one book that I'd like to... And I know I have said... To be honest, I don't know if there's... The books that I love to read, I don't think there's that one book that'd be like, I want to read it over and over. I don't think so. Maybe Paul Coelho's The Alchemists is one of such, because every time I read it, it feels like, I missed something out. Then the Bible, because you're never done. You're never done with the Bible. You read it and you read it again, and you're like, how did I miss that? I've read that particular story in the Bible like 100 times, but I did not get that understanding of it. So I think those two are the only two I can think of. Yeah.
Awesome. Coffee, tea, or a glass of wine while you're writing?
Oh, tea. Tea. Not much of a coffee drinker.
I'm not much of a tea drinker either, but I'm just thinking, what kind of tea? Black?
I have become very exotic in my taste of tea recently, and
Ooh.
thanks to England. But I've found tea to be really interesting. I'm drinking green tea. I'm drinking mint. I'm drinking all kinds. Recent turmeric. I'm drinking different teas for different situations. Teas for relaxing, chamomile. Like my kitchen, I've got all kinds of teas. I think my husband probably thinks I'm going crazy, but I've got all kinds of teas. But I really am in love with teas right now, and it's not because in Nigeria I never really liked teas. Then I moved here. I think before I left Nigeria, I started liking teas a bit. Somebody introduced me. Then I just came here and boom, I'm drinking tea like a British person.
I'll see what comes of that with me. I mean, yeah, I have a colleague in the office who's trying to get me into tea. I know my wife loves tea. Nobody else drinks coffee in the house except me. But anyway, I'm always curious, so I'll see where that curiosity takes me. If you could have dinner with any author, dead or alive, who would it be?
Dead or alive? Can I mention two people?
Go ahead.
Okay. One would be Super Quincy because I love him. Really love him. Then two would be VC Andrews. I want to ask her the simple question. What on earth is going on in your head when you write these books? I think the books are so dark. I really want to know what's going on. What was going on in her head when she wrote Flowers in the Attic, that series, and the other series. She's got like this series of really dark book with incest, with killings, I'm fascinated. I think she's an amazing writer. But I just want to know what was going on in her head when she was writing those books. Like, what was the inspiration? Yeah. So I think those two writers I'd want to. Sipane Quincy would be to say thank you, that I love you. That would be him. Then VC Andrews is just that question. What?
What is one thing you know about Cyprian that that keeps you warm? I mean, yeah, I know you made mention before earlier that he grew up in the north.
Yeah.
Before he moved back to the east, especially during the Civil War. Yeah. He was he was prolific.
Mm-hmm.
He was also, I mean, tell us something.
I think what keeps me warm about him was how, and I know I've said, yes, he grew up in the north, but it's not just about growing up there. For me, he was how he wrote true about them. You could tell that it wasn't his region. And being a Nigerian, we know how it's so different when you're from this region, you're from that region. But you could tell he loved the North. He didn't just grow up there. He loved the North. He was kind about his narrative. He was true about his narrative. He wanted to paint such a rich, vibrant picture. He wanted you to love the North as much as he loved it. And it carried in his books. And I felt that was such a beautiful thing to see from someone who wasn't from that ethnicity, to have such warmth and such depth for the region. Like, I could have sworn he was from the North, because it's not like I ever knew Equenty was an Igbo name. I did not know when I was reading it as a child. But I could have sworn the guy was from the North, But he was just true to it. And in his way of writing, in his style of writing, you could tell his love for family and people. He had this compassion, he had this depth and this warmth. I felt like I knew him. So, and yeah, for me, it was there was something about what I believe is his personality that shone through, that I connected with, even at that really young age, that I connected with. And it just endeared me to him. And sadly, I will never get to meet him because he's gone. But yeah.
What's the weirdest or funniest story idea you ever heard from an aspiring author?
Weirdest. I don't think I've really heard any weird one. I think I think the one that and it's not really weird. It just seemed far fetched. Was some time traveling story that somebody was, and yes, the person could write, because to be fair, if somebody had told me years ago that we would have like a really nice Nigerian fantasy, and when I say fantasy, I'm not talking about the ones with deep rooted in our real, in our actual origin, talking about Ogun Songo, or I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about real fantasy, like what Tomi Adeyemi did with what's called Children of Blood and Bone, Virtue and Vengeance. I think that's why I loved the book, because I was like, oh my goodness, seriously, we've got our own fantasy. Yeah. So so when this person came up with this time traveler, the person's not asking me to do anything with the book, but I was like, really, time traveling? Yeah. I wasn't sold on the idea, but I'm not killing it either. I'm not kicking against it either, because as long as a good writer can sell almost anything. So if the person is really good, the sell time traveling and will act like, oh, people time travel all the time in Lagos and Abuja. It's going to be so realistic in their own way. So I'm not killing it, but it just sounded like, okay, good luck to you. But yeah, that's how it sounded to me. But yeah, I think that's the weirdest one.
If your life were a book, what would the title be?
Oh my goodness, if my life were a book. Never thought about this. Now I'm trying to think of the layers of myself that I would want to reveal in the book, because that's what will determine what I'd want to call it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I really don't know.
That's long enough.
Yeah, because I'm trying to think, like, what would it be?
Yeah, but
it will always be like it would be a title like Discovering Me or something. You know how? Because I think I'm one of those people who I feel like I haven't fully. I know myself to some extent, but I still feel like there's a part of me that I haven't even unraveled. So I do not even know that person. So I think it's probably going to be discovering Dianah by Dianah. It's going to be some weird title like that. Oh, yeah, I know it's going to be. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't thought much about it.
I really get a sense of that, because having known you, I mean, like, you have different layers, dimensions, and I would be surprised if you could wrap that up in one.
See, so that's why I don't know. I'm working. You know what? When you said it, I was going to give out the title of a book that I'm working on. I'm going to say it here anyway. It's called "Mommy's Not Crazy." It's not. I've finished writing it. But
oh my god!
It's called "Mommy's Not Crazy," and and why it came to my head was when you asked me title. I was like, oh, maybe my daughter would say that's the story that I should write myself. My daughter said something last year, because I was scolding her and her brother. I was like, you guys are making me shout like a crazy person, and she goes, my mommy's not crazy. That was what she said. And so I made it the title of a book I'm working on, which is, yeah, it'll be out next year. So I made the title of the book. So I was like, because really, my mommy's not crazy. My husband will probably think I'm crazy sometimes. Yeah, so there's a lot going on. So it's probably Discovering Dianah.
Sounds exciting. It sounds exciting already. Please send me a copy. I'll be happy to do my first review. And
I will.
Definitely not crazy, but here's a full review.
I will send it to you. Really, now that I think of it.
Awesome, Dianah. Thank you so much for your time. I know we've had a little bit of run around trying to work out schedules, but you've been so gracious, and wow, it's I know we could go on and on and on.
I have had a lot of fun doing this. Our pre-interview, our pre-session, and the actual session itself has been lovely.
True. That's true. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, Sachi. It's really lovely. And thanks for what you're doing with this. Like you said, it's about archiving and document. I love it. I think it's such a great idea.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. We'll do our best.
Thanks.